Now, obviously, Christianity, like Islam, comes in a variety of forms. But what I'll be discussing this evening is what the writer C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity, the common beliefs of all of the broad segments of Christendom, whether Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant. In particular, I'm going to suggest, first, that Jesus of Nazareth regarded himself as the unique, divine Son of God. And secondly, that his divine self-understanding was vindicated by his resurrection from the dead. Let's talk first about whether Jesus of Nazareth regarded himself as God's unique divine Son, or only as a prophet, as Muslims claim. I want to examine several sayings of Jesus, which are demonstrably authentic, that is to say, actually uttered by the historical Jesus, and which disclose his divine self-understanding. In fact, today the majority of New Testament scholars believe that among the historically authentic words of Jesus are claims that reveal his divine self-understanding. Jesus' radical self-concept is disclosed, for example, in his parable of the wicked tenants of the vineyard in Luke chapter 20. Even skeptical scholars, like those in the Radical Jesus Seminar, admit the authenticity of this parable. In this parable, the owner of the vineyard sends servants to the tenants of the vineyard to collect its fruit. The vineyard symbolizes Israel. The tenants are the Jewish religious leaders. The servants are the prophets sent by God, and the owner is God himself. The tenants beat and reject the owner's servants. Finally, the owner says, "I will send my only beloved son. They will listen to my son." But instead, the tenants kill the son because he is the heir to the vineyard. Now, what does this parable tell us about Jesus' self-understanding? It tells us that he thought of himself as God's special son, distinct from all the prophets, God's final messenger, and even the heir to Israel. This was no mere Jewish prophet. Jesus' self-concept as God's unique son comes to explicit expression in Matthew 11:27. Jesus said, "All things have been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." Again, there's good reason to regard this as an authentic saying of the historical Jesus. It's drawn from an old source which is shared by Matthew and Luke, which scholars call the Q document. Moreover, it's unlikely that the early church invented this saying, because it says that the Son is unknowable. No one knows the Son except the Father. But for the post-Easter church, we can know the Son. So this saying is not the product of later church theology. But what does this saying tell us about Jesus' self-concept? It tells us that he thought of himself as the exclusive and absolute Son of God and the only revelation of God the Father to mankind. Now think of it. If Jesus wasn't who he claimed to be, then he was crazier than Jim Jones and David Koresh put together. Finally, I want to consider one more saying. Jesus saying on the date of his second coming in Mark 13:32. Jesus said, "But of that day or that hour no man knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." This is an authentic saying of the historical Jesus because the later church, which regarded Jesus as divine, would never have invented a saying ascribing ignorance or limited knowledge to Jesus. But here, Jesus says he doesn't know the date of his return. But what do we learn from this saying? It not only reveals Jesus' self-consciousness of being the one Son of God, but it also presents us with an ascending scale from men to the angels, to the Son, to the Father. A scale on which Jesus transcends every human being and even every angelic being. This is really incredible stuff. And yet this is what the historical Jesus believed. And this is only one facet of Jesus' self-understanding. C.S. Lewis was right when he said, "A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level of a man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us."